Hey there! Today we're going to talk about an ink which I really love, and it's called Lie de Thé. Lie de Thé is French and it means the dregs of tea. That's a pretty disgusting name when you think about it, but it's actually a very apt name because this is a brown ink and it really looks like it's tea, like you're writing with tea. Now, I love tea. I don't know about you, but I do love it, and the ink is great. And the most important thing about this ink is its shading. It's a brown, and it goes from a very light brown to a much darker brown. In some pens, with especially flexi nibs, it's almost like a black at some points. But it's just not black. It's a very, very deeply saturated brown, and I really like it. Okay, so it is Herbin, which means it comes in a bottle like this. This is not it, because I was nearly out of this ink. But this is what the bottle looks like if you don't know these bottles. I had just a little bit left, so I put it in a vial, not a vial, but a nice vial, Eric would say. Actually, I got this vial from Eric, so that's it's a long story. But in any case, just if you want to get maybe a bit of a feel of the color of the ink in the bottle, it's something like this. So it's definitely a brown. I just love it dearly. Nice flow, everything's good. But of course, instead of talking about this ink for a long time, it's much more useful if I just show you what it's like. So we're going to do the writing test. I'm going to do that now. As per your request, we have added a simple copier paper. So instead of just doing it on Rhodia paper, which looks like this, you will get it also on some cheap copying paper. And that's all there is to it. So I hope this is going to be useful. I hope I can convince you to give this ink a try, because I think it's really nice. And I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Hey everybody. Today we're going to have a look at Lie de Thé, one of my favorite inks. It's a gorgeous shader, which is why I like it so much. Let me adjust the page a little bit. It is made by the French company Herbin. And the ink is awesome. I'm not sure whether you agree, but I will do my best to convince you. Why do I like it so much? Well, I already told you, it's the shading. So let's have a look at some basic writing. We start with a fine nib. I try not to get my hand in the way. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. For some reason I'm feeling the movie guy coming up again. This summer, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Will it fit? Will it fit? Yes. Great. Okay, so that was a medium nib. Then let's move on. I'll adjust the lighting a bit. Then we'll move to a broad nib. Now this is going to be a challenge to make that fit. The quick brown fox jumps over. Do you know how this little story is going to end? It's so exciting, isn't it? You have no idea where this is going. the lazy dog. Oh, it hardly fits. Well, anyway. Then maybe an italic nib, because that brings out the shading pretty well in an ink, I think. The Quick Brown Fox. Got tired of jumping over the lazy dog. There we go. Okay, so I think you can see the shading fairly well right there. In the broad nib, you see it. It goes from a very light, and again, if you can't really see what I'm pointing at, it's fine. There will be high-resolution shots of this you can download, so you can follow it. You can see it goes from a very light brown right there to a much darker, more saturated brown. For example, there. I love this ink. I really do. It is like tea. It's like dried tea. Not that I do a whole lot of writing with dried tea, but still. Here's a new swab test suggested by Dan. Instead of using that huge plakat nib, I will just use a 6mm pilot nib, which is still not exactly a narrow, fine nib. There we go. So we have 1 pass, 2 passes, and 3 passes. I just have to wait for a bit, but the good thing about using this pen is that it dries a lot faster than the plakat nib. That, with the last demonstration I did, that really took half an hour to dry. I kid you not, 30 minutes for ink to dry. Okay, but you know, I got the old sample here. As you can see, now that's a really wide line. So this is a bit better. I think it's already dry. Right, there we go. Okay, so I'll just let it dry for a few more seconds. I think we should just do some more writing, so that you get a bit more of a feel for the ink. I will start with a fine, but I will do some more flexing this time, because that brings out the shading of an ink, if in fact the pen does not railroad. My fault. Probably going too fast. This is the Lie de Thé song. Lie de. Thé. There we go. Do you notice what I notice? It starts with an F and it ends in ethering. I know that I knew this ink was a great shader. I don't know why this pen is giving up on me. I'll just push out some ink off screen here, because you don't need to see the suffering. I remember this ink was a great shader, so I got my Ahab and I thought, oh yeah. And I put it in and it feathered like crazy, because of course the Ahab lays down a lot of ink very fast. And that was just not a great success, which is a pity, because it would have been awesome. This is high quality Rhodia paper, so this, you know, it's not a huge issue, but I do think that around here you can actually see a little bit. It's very minor. You see the bit there too, but it's there. Okay, let's do the second pass with the parallel. Okay. Then I will do a medium nib, more writing. Medium. So the color, we'll come back to the color when this is finished. I've told you there is a little bit of feathering sometimes. I will use a cheaper paper later on. I think you can see it a bit better there, but we'll see what happens. Here we have Lie de Thé in medium. You see, this is a very dark brown. This is a bit lighter. This is not the nib I have with the most flex appeal, so it doesn't really flex a lot. And you see the effect immediately, the ink gets less saturated. See the difference? Right. Dot. Good. Broad. Oh yeah. Lie de Thé. Some serious nibbage we got here. Nibbage. Serious. That's illegible. Sorry. It says serious. I'm sort of crooked with my arms around a tripod on my desk here, so you have to bear with me. Here I think you see with this nib, this Lamy nib, which is one of the reasons I picked it. I mean, for these Inkcyclopedia entries, I mean. The good thing about this is that it does tend to bring out shading quite a bit. You see we got some light brown here, and we get some more darker, more saturated brown, pretty dark, and here it's very dark, etc. So that's nice, and I think we are ready for our, yes, for our final pass. Final pass time. There we go. So I'll let that dry, then I'll come back to the colors, okay? Because first we have an italic nib. If this is serious nibbage, this is awesome nibbage. I really love it. So, what we have here is, how am I going to do this? Wait, this is a T. Strange. Lie de Thé in an italic nib. Italic nibbage. Right. Okay. So, let's have a look at the color. As you can see from this saturation test, I'm not sure how well you can see the difference between these two. I'm not sure how well the video of this camera picks it up. Again, there will be high resolution stills for you to drool over, or at least to study. Now what you can see is that this goes from a light dark, a light dark? What am I saying? I've lost my mind. A light brown, and then it goes darker and even very dark. But at no point it actually gets black. This may be close, but it's still brown. And that's what I like about this ink. It really gives you a range of browns. You see that not just when you use a huge 6mm nib, you see it even in a broad nib, you see it in an italic, maybe to a somewhat lesser extent, but you do see it here. So I think that is very nice. It's a color you could use every day. I mean, we started with the Apache Sunset, right? And that's a very typical color. I can imagine there are situations where you cannot use this, but I think this ink is not so flashy that it would actually, you know, distract people from what you are doing or something. So I think you could really use this on a daily basis. Now let's just do a bit of swabbing. Here we have the W, and the W is an interesting letter because it is the first letter in the word water. So here I have some water, And as I just talk, so that this can dry a bit, I will tell you a little bit more about what I'm going to do here. I'm going to put some drops of water on there. We're going to see how well this thing dries and how how waterproof it is, I should say. I'm just talking away sometimes, sorry. So while we're waiting for that to dry, let's give a bit of a sort of what do you call that? I would say like a report sheet or something. So we have the color of this ink, which is brown. We have shading. I'd say that is excellent. You see it here as I write. What about flow? Well, you saw this pen railroaded a little bit, but it's a flex pen. All the other pens, I think, wrote straight away. I think you've seen that. There was no real skipping. As far as I can remember, the flow of this pen is excellent. Oh, sorry, this ink is excellent. I'll put down very good to excellent. Then we have the feathering. Well, it'll depend a little bit on the paper you use, obviously, but I think it's good. So I mean, there's not a huge amount of feathering, but you will, in a very flexy nib, you will definitely get feathering. But that's, I mean, look at these, the realistic, I mean, pens that you may use for everyday writing. I don't see any feathering. I'll use copier paper in a few seconds, so just give me some time and we'll see what that does. But this is just based on experience. Okay, then we have drying time. And actually I think that's pretty good. This is a huge nib, and as you can see, it dried in not, minutes. So you see that's still a little bit wet. All of this is already, well, pretty much all that is dry. So I would say, well, let's just call this medium. So you have short, long, and medium drying times. I would say this is medium at worst, and short at best. Depends a little bit on the paper. Okay, waterproofness. Let's have a look at that nice little W. That looks dry to me. Not anymore. Let's just see what happens. So while that is going off screen, I have here some copier paper, and let's have a look at this. I'm sorry about this spot. I put some ink on there. It's what I do. Let's do some simple writing. And here's my thingy. There we go. Okay, so here we have a fine. I'm trying not to apply any pressure. Fine. This is. I'm not going to do everything I just did there on this sheet of paper. That would take too long. But just a quick sample. The quick brown fox. Jumps over the lazy dog. Note how this paper is more absorbent, and it pretty efficiently removes all shading. You see a little bit there, but I was still pressing down a bit harder. With no pressure, I think you really, I mean, the difference is quite marked, right? This is the fine nib, this is the fine nib. So this is good paper and this is cheap paper. And that's the difference. Okay, now let's immediately go for some flex after that. It's a lot less smooth, this paper. I can feel the nib actually digging into the paper. I want to see feathering. But of course, if I don't, that's just a good sign, right? Let's go for the extremes here. Desperate times, desperate measures. See if we can get that to feather. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see it with the camera, but I do actually see feathering. It's not extremely pronounced, but around the edges of the really wet writing, there definitely is some feathering going on. You see it with the X here, for example. Just check it out in the still shot, I would say. Okay, then we have the medium nib. Look, it's Saint Nibius. Well, anyway. By the way, if I was able to draw, I wouldn't have become a psychologist, right? So feel free to criticize my level of artistry there. Here we got the broad nib. The medium nib, I have to admit, I again did not see extreme amounts of feathering, even on cheap paper. With the broad, I'm going to have to, whoops, use a triplet there, but I really don't think it's, actually it really isn't that bad. Can you see that? Can I make you see? Where is it? There. I don't think you particularly see a lot of feathering, actually. So that's still pretty good. I'm impressed. I thought it would be worse. The quick brown fox waved at Saint Nibius. What does a fox look like? It's got a nose and ears, and it's got a long fluffy tail, and it's got eyes probably, and it waves with one of its paws, and it says, "Hey, Saint Nibius, how you doing?" Right, and then we have an italic nib. Psychoanalyze this. Italic nib. The quick brown fox jumps over the Scottish dog Alright, I don't know why it's the Scottish dog, but it's just there. Anyway, my friend, so here we have cheap copy of paper, and the amount of feathering looks pretty good to me. Let's have a look at the other side of the sheet. Bleed through, some see-through, shade-through, whatever you like to call that, shadowing. But let's be fair. This is ridiculous writing. The bleed-through, I mean, that's flex writing. It will take some really good paper not to have that. So I think that's pretty impressive. But you know, if you're forced to work with this, you definitely see some feathering now. I will again, the high-res shots will show you that a bit better, I think. So if you're forced to work on cheap paper, you can expect some feathering if you use a flexible nib. And I think in general, I'm not sure whether you agree, but I think the cheap paper sucks up a bit more of the ink and will ruin the nice shading a bit. But of course, when you just put so much ink on the paper that the paper just cannot resist, cannot do anything to defend itself, then you will still see some shading. So that's pretty much it. Let's return to our waterproofness test. I don't know whether you kept an eye on that. I did not, but this does not look particularly good to me. So, question. How do I get rid of the water? Oh, I know. I'll try to be careful not to ruin the writing, wipe it out. Alright, so waterproofness, non-existent. Let's add that. Oh, I used another pen for that. So I now agree that feathering is good. Then we have waterproofness. Here we have the score sheet for this ink. Waterproofness, none. I mean, the letter is gone. You can still see the outline very vaguely, but let's face it, if this was an important document, I would be in serious trouble right now. So forget about that. Okay, so there you have it. There will be high-res stills of this. I hope this was useful. Any further comments, any stuff you would like to see us do in the future, let me know, and that's all there's to it. So, I'll see you later. Bye-bye!